All right, we are reading Chapter 7, Section 8, called The Unbelievable Belief. In the text, yes? And it's a fascinating chapter, so I'm going to go ahead. We have said that without projection, there can be no anger. But it is also true without extension, there can be no love. Okay? Remember, projection is what the ego does, and extension is what divinity and spirit do. Projection says, I don't want this in me, so I'm going to put it out there. Extension says, ooh, I want to see what this does as it explores this. Okay. And then it says, the text says, these reflect a fundamental law of the mind, and therefore one that always operates. It is the law by which you create and were created. It is the law that unifies the kingdom and keeps it in the mind of God, the one mind. To the ego, the law is perceived as a way of getting rid of something it doesn't want. I don't want this in me. I'm going to pretend it's out there. All right. To the Holy Spirit, it is the fundamental law of sharing by which you give what you value in order to keep it in your mind. When I share something with you, I have the experience more fully in me. We teach what we need to know. We share what we want to have more of. Yes. All right. To the Holy Spirit, it is the law of extension. To the ego, it's the law of deprivation. Ego says, well, if I give it to you, I won't have it. Right? It therefore produces abundance or scarcity depending on how you choose to apply it. This choice is up to you, but it's not up to you to decide whether or not you will utilize the law. Every mind must project or extend because that's how it lives, and every mind is life. The one mind of the divine is life. The mind of this body is life. The mind of the tree is life. The mind of the stone is life. It is all mind. It is all life. It will either project or extend. Next paragraph. The ego's use of projection must be fully understood before the inevitable association between projection and anger can finally be undone. The ego always tries to preserve conflict. The ego always tries to preserve conflict. So if you're in a relationship that has conflict, your ego is trying to preserve that. Even though you're saying, I don't like conflict, I don't want to be in conflict. The ego aspect of yourself is what is maintaining that conflict. It's very ingenious, if we go on, in devising ways that seem to diminish conflict because it doesn't want you to find conflict so intolerable that you will insist on giving it up. The ego therefore tries to persuade you that it can free you of conflict, lest you give the ego up and free yourself. Using its own warped version of the laws of God, the ego utilizes the power of the mind only to defeat the mind's real purpose. Real purpose is to extend and to create. The ego projects conflict from your mind to others' minds. Oh, I'm not the one who wants the conflict. They wanted the conflict. I'm just the victim. None of us have ever felt that way, yeah? All right. It projects conflict from your mind to other minds in an attempt to persuade you that you've gotten rid of the problem. It's that guy on TV who's been doing that. It's not me, yeah? There are two major errors involved in this attempt. First, strictly speaking, conflict cannot be projected because it cannot be shared. Okay? You can't really project. You can pretend to project, and you can use your mental framework to perceive that you have projected. All right? Any attempt to keep part of it and get rid of another part doesn't really mean anything. Remember that a conflicted teacher is a poor teacher and a poor learner. If you've ever tried to teach something you didn't fully understand, and I think I've heard stories from almost everyone in this group that you have, you know what that means. You felt that. Or if you've gone on teaching long past the point where it was anything you ever cared about, right? Or you've been supervising someone or managing someone and you no longer want to be doing what you're doing. All of that goes on. And it says in the next sentence, his lessons are confused and their transfer value is limited by his confusion. Okay, that's the first error. Anything that is not fully coherent, where you're trying to do one thing and another thing at the same time, doesn't work. And the second error, it says, is the idea that you can get rid of something you do not want by giving it away. And we already know we receive what we give, right? Giving it is how you keep it, the book says. The belief that by seeing it outside you have excluded it from within is a complete distortion of the power of extension. But that's what we were trained to believe. Oh, in lots of ways, lots of ways. And so we, operate on that assumption. Okay, we have to unlearn that belief. Okay. It's a complete distortion of the power of extension. That is why those who project are vigilant for their own safety. All right. If I'm trying to have everything that I don't want to experience in me out there, I have to be keeping on holding it out there, out there, out there. I'm not going to feel safe as long, until I know it's out there. They are afraid that their projections will return and hurt them. Believing they've blotted their projections from their own minds, they also believe their projections are trying to creep back in. And since the projections have not left their minds, they're forced to engage in constant activity in order not to recognize this. This is a huge amount of the stress that disturbs the human body and disturbs life in our culture. Right there. Right there. It's the attempt to keep our projections out there instead of recognizing that what is going on out there is what is going on in here. And as soon as we accept this, then we can begin to shift. And you can see, if you've been following in the lessons, how this is directly related. Yeah? All right. Next paragraph. You cannot perpetuate an illusion about another without perpetuating it about yourself. Period. There is no way out of this because it is impossible to fragment the mind. It's all one mind. To fragment it is to break it into pieces, and mind cannot be attacked or cannot attack or be attacked. The belief that it can, an error the ego always makes, underlies its whole use of projection. It does not understand what mind is, and therefore does not understand what you are. Yet its existence is dependent on your mind because the ego is your belief. The ego is a confusion in identification. We have identified ourselves, we've denied our true identity and identified ourselves as something else. The ego, the next sentence says, never having had a consistent model, the ego, it, never developed consistently. And how could it have had a consistent model? It can't, right? It is the product of misapplication of the laws of God by distorted minds, those people around us in our culture, that are misusing their power. And that reminds me again, in many cultures, these ego issues don't exist because that sense of separation isn't there. That belief in projection is minimized. So perceptions are what the Course has been calling right perceptions, or very nearly knowledge. However, in the next paragraph it says, do not be afraid of the ego. That small mind, it's poor thing, right? I called it like my little baby. It's okay, little ego. You're okay. I'm taking care of you. Don't turn it into a monster you have to be afraid of. Next sentence in that paragraph, it depends on your mind. And as you made it by believing in it, so you can dispel it by withdrawing belief from it. It's not running your life unless you let it run your life, period. All you have to do is say, that's not who I am. I am an aspect of divinity. I am part of the Son of God. I am human, not ego. I am spirit, not stuff, right? Do not project the responsibility for your belief in it onto anyone else, or you will preserve the belief. Don't say, well, I've got this ego because my mom and dad, we recognize that there was an interaction, but we're the ones who built it, We're the ones who've defined it. We're the ones who've empowered it. Nobody else. Next sentence. When you are willing to accept sole responsibility for the ego's existence, you will have laid aside all anger and all attack, because they come from an attempt to project responsibility for your own errors. But having accepted the errors as yours, do not keep them. Okay, this really should be a new paragraph. So I want to go back there. For your own errors. We try to make someone else, made me do it, right? Someone else made me do it. I had to follow orders, all of that. We've been through that in our world. We know that doesn't work. And the same thing is true in our psyche. Let's go on to this really new paragraph. But having accepted the errors as yours, do not keep them. Give them over quickly to the Holy Spirit to be undone completely. And that's what we mean by express, release, and replace, okay? That releasing process is what the Course is calling, give them over to the Holy Spirit. So that all their effects will vanish from your mind and from the sonship as a whole. Remember, whatever we do for ourselves, we're doing for all. The Holy Spirit, the voice for God, the essence, that quiet voice in us, will teach you to perceive beyond your belief, the belief in the ego, because truth, capital T, truth, because truth is beyond belief, and the Holy Spirit's perception, or seeing, or knowing, is true. The Holy Spirit will teach you because the Holy Spirit is only operating, I'm going to use that, is only operating in truth. And therefore, there will always be the guidance into more truth. The ego can be totally, completely forgotten at any time because it is a totally incredible belief. Isn't that a great word? Incredible. Not possible to believe it, but we're believing it. It's a totally incredible belief, and no one can keep a belief he has judged to be unbelievable. So we use logic to help us recognize that what the ego is doing cannot be what's actually happening. We use experience in our meditation, in our prayer work, in our allowing ourselves to be absorbed into the all that is through beauty, through nature, whatever it works, and through our constant reminders of, oh, this is what's true, not that. This, not that. Yeah? The meaninglessness of perception based on the unbelievable is apparent, but it may not be recognized as being beyond belief because it is made by belief. It is made by belief, right? Whatever I'm experiencing, I believe. If my experience leads to greater belief, it's still made by the belief. So when someone tells me, yeah, my experience shows me that doesn't work. No, your belief is that it doesn't work. Your experience is merely reinforcing the pre-existing belief. You have to let go of the belief. All right, last paragraph in this section. The whole purpose of this course is to teach you that the ego is unbelievable and will forever be unbelievable. You who made the ego by believing the unbelievable cannot make this judgment alone. We need a higher power. We're caught up in it. We are so enmeshed in this nest of ideas that we can't get out of it. We have to allow a higher power to pull us through it. By accepting the at-one-ment for yourself, you are deciding against the belief that you can be alone, that belief that you can be separated, thus dispelling the idea of separation and affirming your true identification with the whole kingdom, the whole of divine creation, the whole of all that is in truth, as literally part of you. This identification is as beyond doubt as it is beyond belief. You're no longer believing, you're knowing. Your wholeness has no limits because being is infinity. You are the extension of the divine. You are infinite. Forward into what you're creating, as you move forward into the creation, and as you look through back toward your source, it is infinite, the source of all of us. Wow. Next time, we'll look at section 9. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for doing this work. You're making a real difference. I appreciate it.